Hi y'all, I'm Allison. Welcome to the Mighty Bujo. Today we're going to do something a little bit differently. I am going to go over how my watercolor pictures have held up in my bullet journal since I did them. So that way if you've been thinking about doing them in your own but weren't quite sure how it was going to be in the long run, now you'll know. So anyway, before I pull out my bullet journals, wanted to show you exactly what I used to paint all of these pictures. And it's the Koi Watercolor set. It's the pocket filled sketch box, and you get 24 colors of half pans, and you also get the water brush pen. So, and it also tells you how to fill the brush. It comes with a little mixing tray. It's a really sturdy package. Oh, I haven't cleaned mine from my last painting that I did. But yeah, so here it is, and these little holes are meant to hold it on this side. And then it also has, in the back, a little ring. And that way, if you wanted to hold it, you can put your finger through it, have it here, have this, and then you could easily, it's not heavy at all, hold this in your hand while you're painting somewhere. So this is, like I said, the field one that's meant to go out and about with you. That's the first time one of my paints has fallen out. Put it in upside down. Apparently it's got glue on the bottom to hold it in. So anyway, I have been really happy with this kit. I got it after seeing Miss Louie demonstrate a watercolor page on her channel. So I think it ranges about $20, and it is worth every penny. Really happy with it. But all of that aside, oh, and for the record, no, this video is not sponsored. Although I wouldn't mind a sponsorship. So hey, Sakura, if you're out there. All right, so what we're really all here for is to see how they hold up. Now, these first two pages are going to be the first time that I have shared them. I did these before I started my YouTube channel. Back in July, I started setting up my very first bullet journal. You can see it's had a lot of love. And in August, I was ready to go. So here's what I painted for my very first cover page. The quote was, "I don't see why not." And that was a saying between my daughter and I. She was all summer long, "Can I go to the mall? Can I go to the movies? Can I go bowling?" And I'd always pause for a few moments while I thought about what we had going on and then respond, "I don't see why not." So that kind of became our little mantra. Anyway, here is the very first time I used my watercolors, and probably the last time I had picked up a paintbrush for watercolors had been back in elementary school. So very simple, but I love how this page turned out. And more importantly, what we're here for today is to see how it does over time. So this was done in 2017, August. One thing that I learned very quickly was to be careful with my Tombos. So I did this with the Tombow brush pen, not realizing it is a water-based pen, so it will react to the water as well. And what I had done was I had written out my quote first, and then went in with the purple and added that later, and you could see where it started to cause the black ink to run. So you always want to do your paint first if you're using a water-soluble marker to outline, and then come in and add your outlines after it dries. That way it'll avoid any of that mess. And here is just where my paint wasn't dry enough and I got impatient and tested it. But as you can see, this has held up very well. It was a very light wash of color this time. I wasn't heavy-handed with it. Just for one, I was kind of intimidated still and didn't really know what I was doing, so I kept it really light. But anyway, very first time this page has been shared. So now let's move forward to September. I did a fall theme. Up until I did the clocks, I think this was my favorite. You can see how wonky my lines were, but you know what, it's all right. So anyway, I had some issues with I was trying to build up this tree and I wasn't sure how to show the tree was full. So this is kind of a little bit of a hot mess up here, but it's okay. The important thing to know is if you can see it on camera, behind here, I had my ideas for my next bullet journal. And this is written in Tombow. Whenever I painted this, you can see where the page got wet, so the water-soluble ink from the backside started to show through. So you always want to make sure, if you use watercolors, that whatever is on the opposite side is either waterproof or a blank page, and that will prevent this from happening. I don't think it's terrible, it didn't ruin the page too much, but it's definitely something to be aware of. And again here, I still was using a light hand. There was a little bit of smudging, but this was not from time doing it. This got smudged when I painted it originally. And I did use a waterproof pen to outline everything after it had dried. So I put down my little blobs of color first and then went in and outlined. And this is where I discovered that I like when my lines don't necessarily follow the shape of the color. I like this illustrated look. So you'll see in a lot of my paintings where I'll have these white spots. Personally, I just like that style. It makes me feel artsy. Okay, then we've got one more that I did not paint on camera, and that would be October, although it is shared in my very first video, which, by the way, is really rough. So here is my October page. This one is where I started looking up reference and stuff. Specifically, I had to look up how to do a haunted house. I don't remember what website I saw this on, but it was a marker drawing, so I did it with the pen and the paints. And the lesson I learned with this one was I had penciled in rather darkly that what's your favorite scary movie, and you can see it. I don't know if it's going to show up on camera, but behind it you can still read it. So if you do sketch anything out, either use a light hand so it won't show up, or right before you go and paint, go in and erase it most of the way. If you leave it, just a faint trace of it, the watercolors will cover it. But as you can see, this pencil line stayed, and you can see my outline behind my little moon over here. Again, I didn't get overly heavy with paints this time. It's all smooth, and this page has held up ever since October. So that was the last one in this book. So then we move on. Oh, and if you're interested in a full flip through of my very first bullet journal, let me know down in the comments. Okay, so now let's move on to, let me get all of my extra stuff off of here. This was my holiday bullet journal. This was November and December only of last year. And this is where I started sharing my paintings. And you may have seen the video where I painted my turkey. I was so proud of it. But I definitely had issues with his head. So I kept layering on and layering on the red paint. And as you can see right here, it definitely transferred over to the next page. And we've got a little bit of the brown that transferred over. And I think the reason I did that was, like I said, I very heavily saturated this. In fact, the title of this video was, how much water can a bullet journal actually handle? Because I just went nuts with the water. I think part of it was being nervous being on camera doing this. Everything else held up really good. This is smooth, and the reason I keep checking this is I think that's the key to knowing if it's going to be a problem or not. Because I remember originally this part right here had a grainy feel to it, had a texture. Now it is smooth, and I think what happened was all of that extra paint just rubbed into the next page, into the facing page. So, but other than that, it has held up beautifully. And now let's move on. Santa. Santa is where I knew I had trouble. This I had noticed and I was like, oh, well, that's a shame. But Santa, lots of red. And look what happened to Santa. We've got a lot of red above my title. And again, I had heavily saturated this red. I wanted a very bright, vibrant red. And I think if I had taken my time and done light layers and gradually built it up, I could have achieved that without having all of this excess paint. So now, again, I remember this was really gritty and it's pretty smooth now. And I think it's because it's here. Again, this was a nightmare problem for me. I kept trying to fix this. And you can see where even the black and the red has gone onto Santa's face. I'll try and do a split screen to show y'all exactly how this looked when it was first painted as opposed to now. And by the way, I'm recording this February 27th, so that shows you how long it's been. And you can see where there's red from the sleigh and his beard and everything. So it seems like the problem color is going to be red. You want to be careful with your reds. Do it lightly and don't overdo it, and it'll hold up. And I've been waiting to film this just to test that theory because I have red again in February. Oh, one last thing I want to point out, you can also see where the white from the gel pen transferred over. Now, I think there are a couple of ways I could have avoided this. Was again, make sure everything was dry and not overdo it. And I could have put a piece of paper or a piece of wax paper in between here, at least temporarily, until all of the excess had been transferred off. And then it would transfer on, rub off onto like a piece of scrap paper as opposed to the facing pages. Okay, so that was it for this book. And now let's move on to my current one. Yeah, can you believe I have 3 bullet journals already? And I only started this in August. It's been 7 months. Yeah, I'm a little addicted to collection pages. Let's get all my excess off of here. Okay, so January. Let's see how that has done. Yeah, I didn't use it much. But here is my January page. And I'd say this one looks practically exactly the same as the day when I finished it. There is a little bit of brown over here, but I believe that was me smudging it, just from it not being dry. You'll find I'm a very impatient person. I thought it was good to go, but there's a little bit of smudging. So I probably bumped that because, and the reason I'm saying that is there was no brown on this other page to have transferred over. So this must have been why I unknowingly dragged my finger across it or something. But the important thing is we had some red here and nothing has transferred over. So there's not, let's see, it would have been, there's no red there. And again, I didn't do it layer upon layer upon layer of heavy, still have a solid color, but it didn't transfer. So it's definitely possible. And let's move on. This is why I've been waiting to do this video, because we have red on this page as well. And Cupid has held up beautifully. It's been almost exactly a month since I did this. And even though we have these red hearts, there is no red transfer over onto the opposite page. So, and again, the difference was by now I had learned and I was careful because Santa got messed up almost immediately. I remember working on my pages in December, and I think maybe as early as a week it started to transfer over. So this time when I did my red, I was careful and I went even lighter than normal. I probably could have gone another layer and been darker, but I learned and I didn't want this page messed up, and here we go. So definitely use watercolors in your bullet journals. Just be careful if you're doing red, and don't build up your paint too much. If you feel that gritty texture, then definitely put something between your pages to protect it until all that excess paint rubs off onto it. And then I think you're good to go. And here is March. there hasn't been any transfer. I was a little paranoid at first, so I did have a piece of paper in here between them, but everything's doing good. So there we go. That's what, I guess 7 of my watercolor pictures. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I think my skill is improving as I do each month. It's a lot of fun to do. I highly recommend it to anybody who's considering it. And, oh, one last thing I wanted to mention. You may have seen while I painted this one, how wrinkled my page is. I haven't done my memories yet. So I did grab out my iron and flatten these out. And I ironed, this was the first one I ironed. So if you're curious on the wrinkling, I did not go back and do the other ones. So over time, my January really smoothed out on its own, just from the book being closed. And for completion's sake, let's go back and look and see how wrinkled these old ones were. Because personally, I don't mind wrinkled pages. I was always the type who would write so firmly that my pages would curl. I kind of like the texture feel. So this definitely has a textured bumpiness to it. And my other camera died. But it wasn't, there, you can probably see the wrinkles on this. It's still waiting for my December memories. I'm so far behind. Time, it's getting me. So, yeah, a little bit of wrinkles. That is nail polish. I hate red nail polish. And let's see, how did this one do on wrinkles? Because I really got this one wet. There's a little bit of wrinkling here. And here, just where the page puckered. But it wasn't too bad. You can see where my paint. So, a little bit of wrinkles, not terrible. And they do flatten over time if you have them. Or you can just pull out your iron and put it on silk and give it a nice little pressing. So I have done, I pressed my March one very aggressively. I didn't even bother with a paper towel. I turned it up, gave it like 5 sprays and just put the iron on it, and it worked like a charm. So I may update that video to show how easy it actually is. I think I made it a little bit more complicated than it needed to be. All right, going back to the wrinkles. This one, barely any wrinkling at all because I had used, no. There's a lot of blank space on this. There's really not that much watercolor. And for completion, this one, just a little bit of wrinkling. And yeah, it's not too bad. So anyway, there you go. Have you been thinking about doing watercolors? Just say, I don't see why not, and give it a go. I think you'll be very happy with it. They're a lot of fun to play with. And if you want to see how any of these pages were done, I will have a playlist at the end for y'all so you can see them all. I've grouped them all together. Anyway, I hope everyone has a great day, and I hope this answers some of your questions that you may have had about watercolors in your bullet journal. If not, if you have more questions or comment, please leave it down in the comment box and I will be sure and answer them. I'm going to go get my braces put on, so wish me luck. Bye, y'all.